the Paid to Play podcast. John Williams of Screwwork Let's Play. By PC Port or Pad, you are listening to Paid to Play. I'm Rob Farker, your host for this weekly exploration of the dangerous idea that bringing the things that you love doing, especially the things that you worry make you seem silly, geeky, or odd, into your income-generating life is the best thing you can do. It mightn't be easy, but it is easier than we think and even fear, and I want to show you how. In every odd-numbered episode of this weekly show, I chat with a career crazy, an income iconoclast, someone who has taken the things he or she loves to do, recognised that other people do value the products or skills of that play, and then stood by that value and asked for and received financial reward. Now, they say that when you get started in getting paid to play, one of the best things you can do is get in touch with people who are doing the same thing that you are doing. It's a great networking tool, and although you might be worried about competition, it usually winds up with people actually who have full slates going, you know what, there is this other person whom I was talking to recently. And if you're looking for getting paid to play, I don't think you can go far wrong with a book called Screwwork Let's Play. And if that doesn't give you an indicator that this gentleman whom I have on the podcast today is right up my alley, I don't know what does. John Williams is not only the author of this essential work on ditching your day job and earning an income from the things that you love doing, he is also a coach who runs 30-day challenges that help people discover their thing and figure out just how to start making money off it. In fact, he has even spun off a new section on his site, which is called Find Your Moneymaker, specifically about the people, quite possibly like you who's listening to this now, who's going, you know, I'd love to do something that I love to do for a job, but I don't really know what I'd love to do yet. So it is an absolute pleasure to have John Williams, who has been at this gig for a lot longer than I have and who has made it a success, hands down, which I'm still sort of working on the show with me today. John, thank you again for coming on the Pay to Play podcast.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for inviting me.
So, when did the seeds for Screwwork Let's Play get planted? And which came first, the book or the blog?
Well, I actually started another blog. I was kind of on this path to help people, creative people in particular, get paid to do what they love. And then I started a blog that was just an experiment in what happens if you just do things you like doing and focus on that. And what was interesting is that about 4 months later, I ended up getting offered a book deal. And although there wasn't, I don't think, as a direct response to the blog, it actually came through a client that I'd been coaching, and he met a publisher and mentioned me. But it was a combination of the fact that I was doing a live event for creative people in London. I was writing this blog and coaching people, and some of that stuff from that blog ended up going in the book and formed the basis of it. But probably the seed was actually even earlier than that. Back when I was in a job as a software developer on special effects software for film and TV, which is about as exciting as programming gets, as far as I'm concerned. However, I still felt like that this isn't all of me, and it felt a little bit like this was not the most valuable thing I could be doing with my life. And when I went through lots of exercises and read lots of books about what do you really want to be doing, and I really got down to the nub of it, I realized I didn't want to work. And it wasn't that I wanted to sit around on the beach and do nothing, because I don't really enjoy that all that much. I wanted to just be able to do whatever I felt like doing, do creative stuff, make things happen, have ideas, have fun with them, and then somehow have the money come to me. And it was only a short while after that I got paid redundancy, and because the company merged with another one, and in a foreign country. And so I ended up staying in London and starting my own business then. And that was pretty much the seed of the whole thing. So that's where the pay to play concept for me, because it's a phrase actually used in my book, funnily enough. So I think we came up with the concept more or less together.
Well, it's a fairly catchy one, very alliterative, works. Or is that as no alliteration? Sorry, my English. My English at school suddenly left me there for a second. Um, So, I mean, the idea came to you, and from the sounds of it, at least at the time when you made your start, you were still working at that job.
Mm.
How did you juggle the 9 to 5 with working on the early stages of um, fleshing out this idea and figuring out how you were going to get paid to not work? Because I think that's one of the main
Mm.
struggles that people at least feel like they have, especially if they are doing something that dominates a lot of their week, is where do they find the time and how do they make sure to consistently carve it out of their schedule?
Well, there's no doubt it is tough, and for a little while you're kind of doing two jobs at the same time. And this is something a lot of my clients come and do my programs. And there's a point where it gets really tricky, where you're trying to do your job and trying to do something else, and there's a point where which I call the crunch, where you're lucky if you get to this point, but it's very painful because you're not really making enough money to quit your job, but you haven't got enough time to do your job and do the thing that's taking off
Mm.
on the side anymore. So at some point, you have to kind of have a slight leap of faith from one to the other. But I always recommend people only quit their job at the point they've already know exactly what they're doing. They've got it out there in the world. They're doing some of it. They're getting paid something, and they can see that this is going to work and it's going to make money, and they've already made some. And that's the point at which that's the only point at which you should really consider quitting your job.
Mm.
I actually did a slightly different route, which is I was at Deloitte as a senior managing consultant. It's a global consultancy.
Mm.
And for some people, that's a dream job. But for me, it was just far too corporate and too straight. And I wanted to get out after a year. In fact, I wanted to get out pretty much as soon as I joined, but I realized what it was like. But it took me a year to get around to that. And I also joined with a whole team of people, so I didn't really want to just jump out too soon. And after a year, I managed to extract myself from there. And before I left, my plan was go and do exactly the same work I was doing there, which was technology consultancy for international broadcasters like the BBC, and go and do it directly for those broadcasters rather than through Deloitte. That way, they could pay me twice as much. Sorry, they would pay half the Deloitte rate, because my day rate at Deloitte was something ridiculous,
Mm.
and I would be still much better off because I didn't. They pay Deloitte £3,000 a day, and I get a somewhat smaller amount of that.
Mm.
So I thought this makes sense. So what I did was I focused on the BBC, and this is a strategy I recommend for everybody. You run a campaign that's laser focused, and I decided that I want a job in the BBC. It'd been a bit of a geeky childhood dream of mine to be a cameraman or something like that, and so now I thought I'm not going to be a cameraman. I'm going to be a technology consultant around tapeless TV production, because this is back when people were still using tape to make TV.
Mm.
And I just called everybody I knew and everybody who knew anybody in the BBC and asked them for a contract around this specialism I had. And I even cold called people I saw in the industry newspaper called Broadcast Magazine, and just contacted them out of the blue and said, "Hey, this is me, and I've got experience in this area. I'd love to come in and talk to you." And then eventually, I quit my job. I'd been for a few interviews. I quit my job, and I basically had no work. And then I carried on this whole process. And 3 months later, finally, part of the BBC said, "Come in and talk to us." And after that interview, they said, "Can you start Monday?" And so that was as a contractor, not as an individual. And what I did was, in every contract, I only worked 3 days a week. And so the rest of the time I could develop other things. I was doing a bit of stand-up comedy at the time. And I was doing some training courses. I did a training course in psychotherapy. I was doing one in coaching as well. So I was kind of gearing myself up and getting my skills up.
Hmm. Well, it sounds like of all the things that you were developing there on the side, coaching has, of course, stuck, and psychotherapy, no doubt, has a place in anything that involves human interaction. But I have
Mm.
to ask, did any of the stand-up comedy, did that keep going in any way, shape, or form at all? Or
I did a handful. I did a course actually. So there are now courses in stand-up comedy,
mm,
and I did a handful of gigs, like about 5 gigs, and got quite a good response. Some of them I didn't do very well at one or two, and I kind of looked at this process of becoming a stand-up comic because I was trying to decide what to do in my life, and I said, well, I can either um, spend every night in a room above a pub somewhere in London. This is back when people were allowed to smoke in pubs as well, and performing for no money or almost or very little money in order that I have a very low chance of becoming a successful stand-up comic.
yeah,
Or I could do one of the other things I'm also interested in, like writing, and I'd already been paid for my writing by a national newspaper and a well-known magazine. And so I went, well, I don't feel passionate enough about stand-up to go through that incredibly hard barrier to become a successful stand-up that gets paid a lot of money. So I went into this combination of coaching and advising people, and also writing, and that led to the book and everything else.
sounds like one heck of a convoluted journey in a way. And I guess, everyone, I guess that's one of the main problems. Everybody almost expects that when they've picked something, or once they've got an idea, it's going to be a fairly linear path. But that rarely seems to be the case. I mean, with the amount of people that you've coached since doing it, you must have heard and been involved in tons of stories where people were just trying to figure out where to go and wound up going all over the place in the meantime.
Yeah. No, and that's actually, I mean, I deal a lot with the myths of success. And there's a funny little cartoon that's done the rounds on Facebook a few times and elsewhere, which I think is actually by Dimitri Martin, where people go, how people think success works. There's like point A, point B of a straight line in between. And then it says how success really works, point A, point B, and this massive squiggly mess in
Yeah,
between. And that's definitely true because it's one thing to have a clear business idea and start it. Even then, it will be a circuitous path, if that's the right word. Um, it will still be messy because you have to respond to the market and you have to, get around obstacles and stuff. If you don't even know what you want to do in the first place, like for me, doing stand up and doing psychotherapy and all sorts of stuff, you have to just try things. So this is one of the big messages I'm trying to get across all the time. And I'm actually writing a second book at the moment that will come out next year,
mm.
is about experiential learning. And people think that if you sit around thinking long enough, you'll have a flash of inspiration that tells you
mm.
what you should do with your life. And there are some people who seem to promote this concept that, you wait till you find your calling. And frankly, it is total BS.
Yeah,
Very rarely does that happen. For most people, they don't even have a single calling. I don't. I love writing. I like comedy. I like technology. I like psychotherapy and psychology. I like marketing. I like all sorts of things. So I don't think I have a single calling. And I think that's the case for most people. And so what my model and the one I detail in Screw It, Let's Play, the book, and in my programs is that you pick a project and you stop obsessing about what you're going to do for the rest of your life. Like, forget that, screw that, and say, what do I feel like doing? And so for me, I want to try stand-up comedy. I'm going to do a 12-week course. I'm going to do some gigs. That was as far as I thought. I don't need to decide right now if I'm going to be a stand-up comic. I can do that later. And I remember the moment when, I was several gigs in and I'm standing watching people and I'm hearing that the people who are making it, they are doing 2 gigs a night and they're driving in someone's car, getting a lift up to all the way up the country. Okay, it's a smaller country than Australia, but it's still a few hours drive,
yeah.
UK, just to do a gig for no money. And I just went, no, I don't want it that badly.
Mm.
And that was the only way you can find out is you throw yourself into it. You do some gigs, which I love doing. They're terrifying, but I love them. And you meet people and you hear these conversations. If you people think you can sit at home and Google what is it like to be a stand-up comic, but that's not going to work. So, that's my big message for anyone who's trying to find out what play is for you and what you could get paid for. You've got to go try stuff. And there's then, I mean, I can talk a bit if you want about how you actually get paid, to the paid bit of getting paid to play, if that would be interesting.
Oh, absolutely, of course. I mean, one of the things I was actually also going to ask you about, which I'm not sure if is actually going off on a separate topic, kind of how things are for you now. One of the things I keep hearing is that even when you do discover your thing, and
Mm-hmm.
if you manage to somehow narrow it down to just one thing, people have this expectation that it's going to be, once they get there, 100% of their time just doing their thing, and the money's going to roll in and they're going to meet awesome people who will just give them their money. It will all be sunshine and rainbows. Yet the reality of what people have been telling me since doing this podcast is that it tends to be more, it's 20% of actually playing, as it were, and 80% of business support of that play, all the marketing and book work and all that kind of thing. I mean, for someone who is all about screwing work to go and play, how have you found that
Yeah.
experience, of where you are at the moment and finding that balance?
Yeah, it is true, but there's always a mixture of stuff in anything you do. There are probably some ways you can say. I mean, if you're Eddie Izzard, if you're a really famous stand-up comic, you probably don't need to do much admin.
Mm.
You have people to do that for you. If you're, I'm largely still a one-person operation, but I have an assistant, I have a tech support person, and I have a designer, and so on. So I have freelancers around me who I talk to regularly. And that may expand over the next year or so, if I take on some of the big projects I've got in mind.
Mm.
But it's true that you've got to be realistic. That there are always going to be bits you don't like. I have an accountant and I have an assistant, but I still, for instance, have to do some stuff today on my VAT return, which I absolutely hate. It's a sales tax return,
Yeah.
uh, because I currently know what all those transactions are and can categorize them. So that's a task I really don't like at all. Um, so there is always going to be stuff like that. But I find, and I don't know if I'm just fortunate, but I like a lot of the things. I like the marketing. I love the technology. I love finding out when I can wire up a shopping cart to an autoresponder, and I've got automation. I've got an automation system called Infusionsoft, which runs a lot of my business. And while it's a bit clunky, I do love what it can do automatically. So I think, and what I've done, for instance, is a lot of people in my line of work, they give lots of talks, but that for me is not really all that comfortable. I do talks, and sometimes I really enjoy them,
Mm.
but if that was the main marketing channel for me, I wouldn't like it. So what I do is I mostly market by written means because I like the written word. So even your marketing can suit your personality. And if you're a people person, maybe you do it by developing partnerships. So I'm interested. There's a thing on my site you can look up on screwlsplay.com called Wealth Dynamics, and that's very interesting to look at. And then you can find out what kind of personality you are and what would suit you. So yeah, there's always going to be some things that aren't much fun, but you need to try and set up your business as much as possible so that the things you're doing. And I'm always trying to design my courses and programs. So now I don't really call myself a coach. I mostly advise people. I have a program, as you mentioned, Find Your Moneymaker. It helps people find out what it is you want to do, but it's going to make some money. And then the programs I run with me um, are mostly about getting it going, which is the thing I find most interesting. And if I work with people one to one, I only work one to one with people who have already got an idea, already put it into action, and they need to know how to make it even more exciting to the outside world, how to make even more money out of it. And then it's just a creative joy for me. I've been speaking to a couple of clients this week, and one's doing an amazing thing on Instagram to build traction, and she's doing a competition, and which is partly my idea. And we've got other clients selling something that costs several $1,000s. So each one she sells makes her a significant amount of money.
Wow.
So that's good fun to talk about.
Mm, mm. Um, it's one thing I do find quite good about the world that I guess, especially you and I live in at the moment, John,
Mm.
is that it seems to be getting easier to actually do that initial lot of experimentation of actually rather than sitting around and uh, reading other people's work about supposed dream vocations and all that sort of thing, it's easy to actually sort of get stuck in at the moment. You've been talking every now and
Mm.
again about Fiverr. I
Yeah.
have found on your website, and if anyone is listening who doesn't know what that is already, fiverr.com. It's a
Mm.
freelancing website that was originally sort of set up around the idea of selling $5 US gigs, short little lots of work, and it's changed a lot. I've found over the last couple of years, they've sort of broadened out what people, especially people who've just set up their accounts, can
Mm.
do on the service. But sometimes you find there is a lot of advice out there for people who are sort of encouraging you to take a freelance career seriously. Not to start on content mills, which is sort of like one of these sites where specifically you do sort of sign up for a freelance gig and the pay is not great at all.
Mm.
And there is a worry, I think, and I've experienced it myself, that worry that of settling for less than your worth. And therefore, it's something that's kind of crippled me at sometimes from getting started because I thought, I want to try something, I want to do something, but oh shit, I better not get involved with a website that's not going to pay me for the work the actual worth of the
Mm.
work I'm doing. But it's still been actually fun recently to get into Fiverr and play with it a little bit and put
Yeah.
gig profiles up and just give it a try, even if so far the uptake has been fairly slow. Um, what what's your take on nowadays on that scene of being able to get started, and also that idea of just getting started for its own sake of trying it out, and that opposing idea that you shouldn't start or shouldn't be doing any work for less than you're actually worth?
Well, I think talk about where we are. I think we're at an incredible point in history where it's never been easier to find an idea, make it happen, and make money out of it. We've got the internet now, and all these services out there are like an enormous toy box of things that we can use for little or no money, which do remarkable things that weren't even available even 5 years ago. And most people are just not even bothering. They're spending their time on Facebook, reposting other people's jokes. I mean, I do that as well. But if that's all you're doing with the internet, it's kind of like someone giving you a Ferrari and you driving it around everywhere in first gear.
Mm,
It's an incredible waste of time. And I think part of the problem is people imagine you have to have a killer business idea before you do anything. And like I'm saying, go and experiment. There are worse things than putting a thing on Fiverr, advertising yourself and trying out a skill, selling yourself for a skill the first time, and just see it. It doesn't mean that you're dedicated to, that's you now. And the fact that you sell yourself for five, $10, $15 or something ridiculous for a quick bit of work doesn't mean you're doomed to do that forever. You can take your listing down later. Over time, the way you're going to get the reason for doing those things is to get experience and also to play out your idea. So I'm always using this phrase to play it out. You got to experiment with what is it I like doing, what is it I'm good at, what is it the market responds to. So one of the examples I always use is writing. And if you think you want to write or you want to be a blogger, the only way to find out what you want to write and exactly what your particular USP is, your unique selling proposition, is to write blog post after blog post after blog post and see where it's taking you. And what we have to do in that process, and you can do that also on these sites like Fiverr, you can experiment with what is the kind of work I like doing and what is it that I'm particularly good at. Because the more you can specialize, then your value increases. But if you can specialize in something people really want. So there's always got to be a match between what you want to do and what you're good at, what the market wants. And I quote Aristotle in my book, where he says something like, where your joy and the world's need meets, there lies your vocation. So he means you can find the point where all the stuff you enjoy matches something people really need. That's where you can make a living. And that dude said it over 2,000 years ago. Actually, probably more, isn't it? 2,300 or something. So that's the best careers advice, the best business advice I can think of. Find something you love doing, you're good at, and that other people need, and you can make a living doing that. And the more you specialize in some area that's going to be useful, then the better. But the only way you find it is by just experimenting, be willing to try things out.
Now, I think asking my usual question that I tend to end every episode with, about 3 pieces of advice that maybe you wish someone had told you when you were starting out that might help somebody else who's deciding that they want to get paid to play but have no idea how. It seems a little bit disingenuous given that you've pretty much spent most of the episode giving out bits of advice for people who want to get paid to play. Yeah. So is there, I guess I'll just ask, is there something that you find yourself that you do keep telling people over and over again that you have not yet said so far?
That's a good question. I think I do find myself saying play it out a lot. I think what I'm trying to do overall, there's a theme to all of this, which is that the education system has unfortunately brainwashed us to be ready to be a passive employee. And it's designed that way because it was designed by industrialists. So when the Industrial Revolution happened, first of all, in the UK, we designed the education system to create compliant factory workers. And then those factories kind of mostly went away to other countries. And now we have offices, but they look largely like a factory. It's a bunch of people sitting at a laptop instead of sitting at a machine. And so the education system still is designed to make you one of those workers. And there's very little in there. There may be occasional, like, let's do an entrepreneurial experiment. But the whole point of education is you have to sit there. There's only one right answer. You have to put your hand up when you want to talk. You have to wait for a bell before you can even go to the toilet. It's a bit like Pavlov's dog. So this is not really the way human beings were designed to operate naturally. It's not the way natural selection designed us. And in actual fact, we're much more naturally designed to be entrepreneurs because when we're young and before we go to school, we experiment. We don't mind if we pick things up and we drop them. We don't mind if we get water all over the carpet. We don't mind any of these things. We don't mind if we upset people a bit. What we're doing is we're learning all the time, and we notice, and then we start to improve, our results by doing different things. So that's all you need to do as an entrepreneur. Basically, you just need to experiment and play with something and persist until you get there. So I think what I'm saying is you've got to watch for all that stuff that happened when you were at school and somehow go back to the way we are born to be, which is to be naturally curious, natural experimenters. And I think the other thing I was thinking of, there was kind of a related point to this, which I've now completely forgotten. But, I'm sure it was profound and life-changing, whatever it was. I might think of it in a moment. So I guess, that's what I'm trying to help people do. Here's the other thing it was, that I got obsessed when I was trying to work out what to do with my career and I was still in a job. I got obsessed with, well, will it make money? Will it make money? Will it make money? Will this make me, if I'm on £50,000 a year, will it make me £50,000? And that's not a very constructive question to ask for a business. It's not irrelevant. I mean, certainly you could consider what the top end is for something you're going to do. But if you're trying to decide whether to write a book, or if you're trying to decide, the kind of projects, should I try out stand-up comedy, or should I try out writing a blog? That question of, is this going to get me paid 50 grand and I can't see how, or whatever the figure is for you, it might be 100 grand or it might be 25 grand, then that's paralyzing. So what you have to do instead, I would suggest, is you just pick a project, you follow it through, and you ship it. So I have a program which is not running at the moment, but I suspect I will run it next year. It's called the 30-Day Challenge, and people make an idea happen in 30 days, and we have 300 people at a time all over the world picking an idea and making it happen in 30 days. And there is a pain point you go through at some point during that 30 days where you lose confidence, you get a knockback, you don't know where you're going, you doubt your project. And if you can push through that and deliver something at the end, you've learned like the most fundamental entrepreneurial skill. Making money is relatively simple, to be honest. I mean, you just kind of slap a price on something and then you just have to do all the 1,000 actions involved in marketing, make it work. Finding the thing which actually you can do really well that people really love, that's the tough stuff, and being able to persevere to make it happen. So I'd say, top piece of advice, pick a project you really fancy doing, even if you don't know it'll make money. Go do it, follow it through, but you got to produce something at the end. So you got to ship something.
So after listening to this episode, where can people go to find out a little bit more about you, John Williams, and your initiatives, Screwwork, Let's Play, and Find Your Moneymaker?
Well, if you go to screwworkletsplay.com, in fact, if you type in Screwwork into Google, it auto-completes of Let's Play, which I think must make my mother very proud indeed. And if you go there, you can enter email address and you get an audio class from me and some worksheets that will help you choose the direction you want to go in and kind of break down your options for what you could do. And you can also get a free chapter of my book. And on there, you can also find out details if you don't yet have, if you know you want to do something on your own and not need to have a job. There are details on there. Find Your Moneymaker. If you look in the menu, look in there for Find Your Moneymaker and read all about that program. And in fact, Rob, I think you've got a special offer for people, haven't you?
As a matter of fact, I do, John. Thank you very much for asking about that. If you go to the Find Your Moneymaker website and check it out and look at the course that John has going there and decide that, yes, that is actually for me, I could really use some help in figuring out just what it is I want to do, then when you go to the shopping cart, you will be asked to enter a promotional code. Now, you might want to have pen and paper handy because I want to make sure you do get this right. Make sure that you enter the promo code. Here it comes. P2P. Have you got that? It's a little bit on the complicated side. I just want to make sure. I'll say it again for you, just so you make sure you've got it right. It's P2P.
That's number 2, right?
Number 2, indeed it is. So letter P, number 2, letter P. Does it matter what case it's in, John?
No, I don't think so. And that will basically give them the whole Find Your Moneymaker program for half price.
That is 50% off the Find Your Moneymaker program. So thank you very much, John, for setting that up for listeners of the Pay to Play podcast. And John, thank you once again for coming on the show. It's been fantastic having you.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you, Rob. I think it's the ideal podcast. So I'm glad you found me.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for listening. Thank you very, very much. It means a lot to me that you are downloading this episode and getting it between your ears, and I hope that the chat in this episode was of help to you. Now, there are a couple of things that I would like to ask you to do for me. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to it on iTunes or your preferred podcast aggregator. And while you're there, could you give it a rating and leave a review, please? Also, on social media, could you like, favourite and share it? The Paid to Play podcast has pages on Facebook and Google+. Please like the page or add it to your circles as appropriate. Like +1 and share the episodes. And also join the Facebook group Fans of the Paid to Play podcast. There is also a Paid to Play podcast channel on YouTube where I upload the episodes. Please like and share them, and I would love to see your comments there. If you are a Twitterer, I am there as well. You can follow me at ByRobF. That's Bravo Yankee Romeo Oscar Bravo Foxtrot. I tweet the episodes on there, so if you could please favourite and retweet as well. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, I would love it if you could sign up to Patreon and back the Paid to Play podcast. You will find the Patreon page for this podcast at www.patreon.com. That's Papa Alpha Tango Romeo Echo Oscar November.com/paid to play, all one word. Patreon is a crowdfunding website where, instead of backing a specific project once, people back ongoing projects like podcasts on a per month or per episode basis. You'll find my milestones and goals for the Patreon campaign there, and it would be great if you could get behind this podcast on a financial basis, even if it's just for $1 an episode. It will help me make the podcast bigger and better. I will be able to put a little bit more time and cash into it, and that way it will be able to better help you get paid to play. Now, next week's episode is going to be an even episode, which means it's Money Where My Mouth Is, Musings and Mailbag. It's where I talk about my own progress toward getting paid to play, put a little bit of overthinking into some of the issues I've encountered, and the overall idea of taking what you love doing and asking people to pay you for the products and skills of doing what you love. And I also answer your questions and read out your feedback. So I would love any mailbag submissions you might have. You can get in touch with me via any of the aforementioned social media. You can either leave a comment on the page or send me a private message. You can also email me at podcast@robf.com.au. Please indicate that your comment or email or private message is a mailbag question, and that you're okay for me to read it out on the episode, and also whether you're okay with me giving your name or online ID as the person who submitted the feedback or question. And if you've got multiple online IDs, please let me know which one you would prefer me to use. I am not a psychologist or trained therapist or coach. I'm just a guy with a mic and a dream and a little bit of experience and perspective. But again, I would love to hear from you. So, until next time, this is Rob Farker asking you to stand by your play. You might be surprised how many folks appreciate it. I license the interview and monologue content of the Paid to Play podcast under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 3.0 unported license. That roughly means you can sample, remix and redistribute it as long as you tell people that the bits of it you use came from Rob Farker and don't charge anyone for your work. For the full legal text, go to creativecommons.org. The theme music is written, performed by, copyright and used with the kind permission of Miracle of Sound. All rights reserved. For more great music inspired by geek culture, check out miracleofsound.net. This podcast is hosted by Business Web Integrations. Get in touch with them at businesswebintegrations.com.au to discuss your web hosting and business needs.